I love the analogy you talked about when you said about the running thing, that if you ran a half a mile, at first you'd
Mhm.
be exhausted, but then eventually you'd get used to running a half a mile, and
Yep.
then and same thing for a dog, right? So here we go, run our dog, and all our dog does is to get stronger and more difficult to
Yeah, they get better at running. Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
right.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of, in 20 or 30 minutes, they're ready to go again. And I've seen that this has just been so valuable with this 10-month-old Malinois, because he loves to work. Like, if
Mhm.
he's not doing something that is stimulating his brain, he is bugging the heck out of us to do something. Like, he doesn't
Yep.
want to just go play with his toys. He might do that for a few minutes. He wants to engage us in
Mhm.
whatever it is, And so it's fun to see the joy in him from doing things, and for 15 or 20 minutes. I'm not talking about hours, 15 or 20 minutes of that kind. And you can tell, like, I'll put him in his kennel and he'll just go to sleep,
Mhm. Yep.
because, and I'm just like, wow, this is so interesting, because yes, he's been physical in what we've been doing, but he's really had to think.
Yep.
And teaching him to think for himself, and you can see his patience level. I mean, like, I just did get the dog I need, because sometimes I'm really impatient inside, even though I can be patient with people, but inside
Sure.
I'm not. And so I'm like, oh great, now I have a dog that's really impatient inside too, who's forcing us both to think of things differently and to do
Mhm.
things differently then. Go way, way back. And how did you talk, I read a little bit about your history in terms of your professional training, but
Mhm.
like, why did you get into this in the first place? Like, as a kid or a person,
Yeah.
like, what drew you to this?
So interesting. So that goes. So when I was a very small child, so I would say probably 2 to 5 years old, I was terrified of dogs. My neighbors at the time, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. My neighbors at the time had this black lab, and we lived in Texas at the time. I was born and raised outside of the Dallas area, so we lived in Texas at the time. My neighbors next door had this black lab, and every time I would see the dog, it would just get so excited it would jump on me and scratch my face. And so, as a very, very small child, I became afraid of dogs. I didn't want to be around them. I was afraid that the dog would jump on me and scratch my face. And we even did some house sitting for them while they were gone, and I wouldn't go over there. And it took me a while to build up the nerve to go over there with my mom to help take care of the dog. And then my family got me my first dog when I was probably 7 years old, somewhere in that ballpark, 7, 8 years old. His name was Bo. And Bo was a gigantic mixed breed that we just came across. He was like a lab retriever, Rottweiler mix, just a big Heinz 57 mutt. He was like 100 pounds. He was a huge dog. And I just absolutely fell in love with that dog. And we had an unbelievable relationship. Like I had said, I did martial arts when I was a kid. And so I would go out in the backyard and wrestle with the dog. And I would try to hold the dog down. And my mom would call him and he'd throw me off and run across the yard with me hanging on his back. And so I just had a lot of fun with him. He died young. He had a genetic disorder that he passed away at 7 years old from. And so he didn't live a super long time. But during that time, as I was going from 7 to probably 12, 13, 14 years old, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who lived in rural Arkansas. And my grandfather was a big raccoon hunter. And so he had coon hunting dogs. And so at any given time, I would go to his house and he'd had, 9 to 12 working hounds that he would, during the wintertime, during raccoon season, he would take and load up in the truck and go out to the woods. And he would spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours at night in the woods with his dogs, just out there doing cool stuff together. And that's where I really started to kind of find a love for, like, it was fascinating to me how he could take a puppy and he could teach it that its job was to use its nose, track and trail this animal until it went up a tree, and then stay at the tree and bark at it so that the animal wouldn't leave the tree.
How did he
And
learn that? How did he learn how to do that?
that's a very raccoon hunting is a very southern tradition thing. So in the South, it's a huge, huge sport. People compete in it, and I mean they'll win things like brand new pickup trucks and all kinds of stuff, competing in coon hunting competitions. And so I don't know if it's something he learned. I actually never really asked him. I don't know if it's something he learned from his father or whether it's just something he got into and had buddies that taught him how to do it. But it was just fascinating. I remember going to his house one time when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and he had this raccoon that he had trapped live that he was using to help imprint puppies on the odor of a raccoon. And so I didn't know at the time what he was doing. I do know now what he was doing, but at the time I didn't know the science about what he was doing, and he didn't know the science either. He just knew it worked. And so it's interesting when you meet what I call old time dog men, which were dog men that learned what they learned about dogs through trial and error and just through the advice of others that did the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty interesting now looking back at that. And I see what he was doing with dogs, and I can articulate scientifically what was going on the dog's brain and why that worked. He didn't know, nor did he need to know. Mm-hmm. He just knew intuitively and through his relationship with the dog what worked. And so life was very different for dogs and humans back then. His dogs never came in the house. His dogs lived on a chain. They had a whiskey barrel as a house. He dumped food on the ground for them every day, and they had water. And those dogs were happy as could be, because they would just hang out there and bark and howl at the moon. And then he would go get them at night, load them up in the truck, and they would get so amped. They knew what they were doing, getting in the truck to go hunting. And they were so excited. And they come out of the truck, and he'd fix all their radio collars to them and put them on, and they'd be off in the woods. And you'd hear them as soon as they go off barking. And I remember riding around on the four-wheeler with my grandfather in pitch dark, and he would turn it off and listen to his dogs. And by the way they were barking, he could tell whether they were on odor, whether they were chasing a raccoon, or whether they had one in a tree. So he could tell whether they were just messing around, playing by the river, or whether they were actually on odor and tracking an animal just by the way their bark sounded. And so that stuff kind of fascinated me. And dogs then just kind of became a part of my life all growing up. My wife and I met young. My wife and I met when I was 19. When we first met, we adopted some dogs. And when we got married, we then moved in together, and we had those dogs together. And we started having some fighting issues in our house. And so I had two females that I had adopted.
Between the dogs, or you and your wife?
Between the dogs. And it certainly did fuel arguments between me and my wife as well. But between the dogs. And so we had adopted these two females, this little Staffordshire Terrier Pit Bull mix, and then this female Boxer Hound mix. And I was at work one day. I was teaching children's martial arts at the time. And I was at work one day, and my phone rings, and my wife is panicking. And she's like, "Brian, I need you home right now. The girls are fighting. I can't stop it." I get home, and Katie is sitting on the floor, and she's got both dogs by the collar, holding them apart. Katie's covered in blood, and the dogs are covered in blood. And these dogs had lived together in perfect harmony for the last 6 months. They ate out of the same bowl. They played together. They slept together. They cuddled together. And I was beside myself. I was like, what the heck is going on? This doesn't make any sense. I can't wrap my head around how this is even possible. These dogs have been fine. What happened? And so I found a local trainer, hired a local trainer. She came out, and she was the trainer to the stars at the time in Dallas. So she had trained she had trained George Lucas's dog, and she had trained a lot of big profile people's dogs. So she came out, and she pulls up, and she had a blue Tahoe. So she pulled up in her Tahoe at the time, and she comes in, and she sits down, and she was kind of very arrogant in how she dealt with us, because we were just kids. And we had no money. We were completely broke. And so we scraped together every penny we had to have her come out and pay her $300 for the hour to come out and give us advice. And so she came out, and she was like, "Well, here's the thing. I can teach your dogs how to sit and how to stay, and they'll do that really, really well. But you can never have these dogs around each other ever if they're not on an obedience command." And I just didn't buy it. And that's literally how the whole thing started. My brain has always kind of functioned that way, where I'm just like, man, that doesn't make sense. I bet I can figure this out. And so that's literally how the whole thing started. I didn't buy it. So I started buying books on dog training. I started trying to seek out mentorship from anybody that would let me come watch them train a dog. I started watching shows and documentaries on the people that live with and integrate themselves into wolf's packs and how the natural dynamics of dogs work. And my initial understanding back then was very, very different than it is today. But even with that understanding, I was able to create peace within my home. I was able to get these two females to be able to be around each other. Now they weren't ever to the point where I could leave them together when I wasn't there, because the reason they were fighting was a leadership dynamic problem. And dogs are very interesting. And at the moment leadership removes itself, they will immediately try to figure out who's leader among themselves. But as long as I was there, the dogs could be around each other and they could interact and they could walk by each other and there wasn't fights all the time. And I was like, okay, I think I'm on to something here. Like it makes sense to me intuitively how this dynamic works in a house. I kind of get it. And so I just started outsourcing my time, and I started going to rescues and going, who do you have? Who's the dog that you can't walk by another dog's cage? Who's the dog that's been returned twice on adoptions? And I started offering. That's when not long after that, about a year and a half after that, is when I moved to Tennessee. And that's when Corey and I started Tennessee Dog Psychology back in 2007. And so he and I just started talking to people and helping with their dogs and doing it for free and doing consultations and going and sitting in people's houses for 3 and 4 hours and trying to explain to them why what they're doing isn't working and why their pack's balance is out of order and how to try to recreate that balance. And then it's just evolved from that over the years, because I'm a very cerebral person. I really love learning. And I really love understanding the depths of anything, right? Like I'm not the kind of guy that wants to know that my engine works on my car. I want to know how my engine works on my car. And so that's just my personality type. And so as time went, it just evolved into a deeper and deeper and more scientific and researched understanding of how dogs operate. And so that was kind of the journey. It was born out of necessity, for sure. Katie and I had no money. I couldn't afford to pay the fees this trainer wanted. And I felt slighted, right? I felt taken advantage of when the lady comes in and I give her literally every penny we have. Like Katie and I probably didn't pay our electric bill in order to give her that $300. And then what she tells me, I'm just like, that can't be it. That can't be all there is to this. It can't just be about sit. And so that's how the whole thing started.
And your wife must have really loved you, because I understand she's not really a dog person.
Yes, she very much loves me. That is very true. And she is very much not a dog person. Now she's a cat person. Yeah, she's a cat person. She has evolved to tolerate dogs, would be a good word for it. She has some dogs that she likes and enjoys, but it is not at the level that I do. Right? She's not interested in training the dogs. She's not interested in really working with them. She's interested in taking care of them and making sure they're taken care of. But and then we've got a couple of our dogs that she enjoys being around. But we like very different dogs, right? She likes her ideal dog would be an old English lab that has just run out of energy and just wants to lay around and sleep all the time. That's not my idea of a fun dog. My idea of a fun dog is the one that's literally climbing drywall. Like, I'm like, that's fun. I like that dog. So we just have different opinions on that.
Oh, that's funny. And what a great story. And for those of you listening Colorado has lots of dogs. I mean, I know lots of people around. So people not in Colorado will listen to this, but I love that in the training you're doing. So you can talk about this a little bit, but the way I found you is on Facebook. And I saw a lot of advertisements on Facebook, because as soon as you put anything about a dog in Facebook, you just get bombarded with every training possibility out there. And I liked what you were saying around your approach and what I love about the community and what you're doing in the community. So just for those of you out there, Brian put together a series of videos, and then also past Q&As, which are great learning opportunities, because people come on and they have real life questions, and Brian talks through it and we're able to ask more questions, and it's a really safe environment. I mean, the first time I said a video, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm probably looking like I know nothing, but it's okay, because I care about my dog, and I'd rather, show somebody what's going wrong so that they can help me do it better, right? For the sake of my dog and everybody in my household. But what I love about the community is that. And so if those of you out there have a dog and you aren't in total sync with your dog, if you aren't, what do you say, Brian, have great motivation and great obedience for your dog, and this is really worth it. And right now it's like $27 a month or something like that,
Super cheap.
right? Like it's
Yep.
super cheap and it's amazing training. And again, not just the training, which you can go over and over and over again, but being in the community. Brian does a live call every Saturday, which is fun to be on. But then also, if you can't be on, it's great to be able to listen to. So if you have a dog out there, you just need this. I don't care what stage you're at with your dog, you're going to learn things in this community and with this training about the relationship you can have with your dog that you probably have never had anybody else help you understand. And what I like about what you're doing is not just the why, what I call the why, right, behind things, but you are really good at breaking it down to the simplest of hows that anyone can do that. Like when my grandkids are here, because this dog came in and he was super affectionate. And I don't know if this is a Malinois thing, but he loves to bury his head under your legs or in your arm.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did that. But what we didn't realize is how I don't think anybody really worked with him, which is why I think he got returned to the rescue. But he started like jumping on the kids and actually like putting his mouth on their head. Like it wasn't biting them, but it was definitely a dominant and more than they could handle.
Sure.
And so we shifted very quickly to the kids are never alone with him. And I heard what you said on one of the other Q&As or one of the trainings that a 12-year-old child should never be left alone with a dog they can't handle. And I thought that was really great advice. And because we want to keep them safe and not afraid. And so even working with them in helping them learn how to have a relationship with that has been really helpful. And they're 6, 8, and 11, and they can learn this stuff. And they learn it quickly. And so I'm just giving you such a huge pitch out there for anybody listening. If you have a dog or anybody has a dog, just get on there, join the community, start learning stuff, start doing stuff. It's just become kind of my newest obsession. This is all I
I love it.
And so I love that that's how you got into it. And then what year was it that you and Corey, I know I read that. Was it 2012?
7 that we started it originally was 07.
Yeah, started into business. And so where do you see this going?
Good question.
In the future for you? And I want to go back to some things, but this is just good to talk about that.
So it's a great question. So I have, being in this for almost 25 years now, I have seen the ugly side of the dog training industry for a long time. There's a lot of scam artists out there. There's a lot of trainers that really don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of trainers that believe they know what they're doing. And they believe they're helping people. Unfortunately, the advice they're giving will cause more problems in the long run than it will good.
Yeah, and let's stop there a minute and
sure.
We're not trying to diss any other dog trainer or anything like that, but there are differences. And so what is sort of the traditional approach that's happening out there that is creating more problems compared to what trainers are doing differently now, I guess?
So that's a great question. So there's kind of two of them. There's two kind of primary things that we see that are that can cause problems in the long run. One of them is the kind of what they would call the alpha methodology, right? Which is if your dog isn't listening to you, it's because you're not the alpha, they're the alpha. And in order for you to become the alpha, you need to take that by force. So that methodology teaches things like grabbing your dog, putting them on their back, holding them by their neck. And the original concepts there were that humans were trying to mimic what dogs did to each other. The problem is we know very clearly now scientifically that dogs do not view communication from humans as another dog. So they don't look at what we do and go, oh, that's another dog doing it. They know that we're a different species and they interpret those things differently. So that's one methodology, is kind of the dominance, pack leader type mentality. Now, leadership is important for a dog, but looking at it in terms of alpha and hierarchy and is not healthy from the human to dog perspective. Dogs absolutely create social hierarchies among themselves, but they're the same species. We're not. And so that alpha mentality, alpha rolling, making sure that your dog never does it, that's a big unhealthy mentality. The other one that's kind of the complete counter opposite and the natural counter opposite. So the reason that the force-free dog training movement came into play was because the large majority of the dog training industry was that alpha dominance, all heavy punishment type of mentality. And so there was a natural opposite swing, right? When people were like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't like that. I don't want to roll my dog on their back and wrestle them to the ground. That seems icky, right? The natural opposite to that was, what if we just do it all through treats and praise? And the truth of the matter is, both of those mentalities are part of the learning experience, but both of them are incomplete in and of themselves. Dogs do need to understand consequences for actions, i.e. punishments, right? But rolling them on their back and holding them down by their neck isn't it, right? And dogs also need to get reinforcement and reward for doing positive things. But doing that alone will never teach them what wrong is. And so those are the two kind of big swings on the ends of the industry. And then there's so many variations in the middle, right? There's a lot of people that call themselves balanced trainers, which technically would be what I do. Because balance just means that you operate both in making sure the dog understands right and wrong. They need to understand reinforcement and consequence. But a large majority of balanced training is actually punishment-heavy training with very little reinforcement. And that's not right either. It really is about balancing the dog's understanding of right versus wrong. And so the thing about it is and this is where it gets really, really difficult, because your force-free community truly believes in their heart of heart that if you tell a dog they're wrong for something, or you help a dog create a consequence for themselves, that you are being cruel to the animal. So they are operating within their own moral code. The problem is it's not scientific. Now, they will find pseudoscience to try to back up their claims, but if you really dig into the science, you'll see where the testing breaks down. It doesn't actually hold true. And so that's where we have kind of two major ends of the industry. And the thing is, I generally don't blame those people, because they're doing what they think is right. I don't believe that those people are out there intentionally trying to cause harm to animals or intentionally trying to set owners up to fail. Do I think that there are probably people in our society that do that? Sure. But it's the minority. It's not the majority. I think that most people don't get into dogs with ill intentions.
You know,
and so,
it's like grandkids or kids, right? Like,
yep.
I've just noticed the difference because these boys are very bright and they're very busy and they have to be directed, or my 6-year-old just unplugged every cord in the house and brought it to the kids,
Yep.
right? And so I've just noticed that boundaries help my horses know how to stay safe, right? Because without that, they would run in the road and get hit by a car. And so that whole thing around good boundaries, and I love what you're teaching us, which is let the dog figure it out. Let the dog realize they actually created the consequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And then they learn better. So anyway, I interrupted you with that little
You're good.
Going.
No, but that's exactly right. And when we look at consequences, the old school way of dog training is everything was human focused, right? You don't do this because I said so. If you do that, I will cause pain on you. You will listen to me. You will submit to me. And it was a different mentality. And I believe that dogs learn consequences best when they're self-created. I believe that all animals learn consequences best when they're self-created. And so when you do something yourself that causes you a pain point in your life that you can clearly recognize, I caused that. I'm not placing the blame on anybody else. Nobody else did that to me. I did that to myself. That's a learning experience I can never take away from that person. And dogs are the same way. So if we can help them understand their boundaries through self-created consequences, it changes the game. And it never puts conflict between owner and dog. We never have to be the bad guy. We never have to be the guy that's mad because you didn't do this because I said so. We can just be the guy that lets you experience your own consequences and just loves you enough to realize you need to understand those boundaries. And, it's funny how the dog world looks at consequences frequently as a bad thing, yet they don't just let their own children do whatever they want all the time, no matter what. I mean, I ask people all the time when they're like, well, I don't want to put boundaries. I don't want to put consequences on my dog. I'm like, okay, well, if your 10-year-old says he wants to eat ice cream every day for every meal, are you going to let him do that? Well, no. Why? It's not good for him. Bingo. You're setting boundaries because you know, as the adult, what is and isn't good for him to create the life you need to create, right? The same thing happens for our dogs. Our dogs are not in the wild. They have to live in society. They're in a civilized society, which means we need them to understand boundaries that they don't have to understand if they're in the wild. Mm-hmm. They don't need to do that. And so we have to be the ones that know what's good for them. And we have to know, hey, you know, when you're in Yellowstone National Park as a wolf, you don't really have to worry about getting hit by a car. When you live in a neighborhood, you do. Which means if I call your name, you got to stop, you got to come back. Because that's an important safety thing that I know that you don't naturally recognize. And that's where our responsibility is to teach those things.
Yeah. And I've just been thinking about that so much, this is the way I keep my dog safe.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
This is the way, if I'm a leader, and I really believe in servant leadership, you know, mm-hmm. which is always about helping someone else grow, develop, be the highest and best self they can be. Well, it's mm-hmm. true for my dog too, right? If I care about my dog as a good leader, I will learn how to really help my dog figure things out and understand and keep him safe and everybody around him. So I'd asked you where this is going. So I want to get back to that.
That's funny. I was just thinking we need to get back to that. Okay. Yeah. So here's where this is going. So I've become a little bit disillusioned with the traditional dog training model of local business, brick and mortar, serves the local market, small. Is that necessary? Absolutely. It's a necessary part of the industry. I'm just kind of at a point where my brain is starting to try to think bigger and starting to think, okay, well, how can we get better information out there? And that's how we got off on a tangent, is I was thinking, okay, it's the information that people are getting that's not good that we need to help with. So the first evolution was creating a Real Dog Rehab online program, right? And so that evolution was, how do I get better information to the masses that is concise and built in a format where people can understand it? Because there's a lot of online dog training programs out there, but there's a lot of dog trainers that are great with dogs and their communication skills are subpar. Not that they don't want it to be great, but they're just not there. And so it's hard to learn, it's hard to understand. And so I really wanted to create something that was simple and digestible, but wasn't surface level, that would go as deep as people wanted to go with understanding neurochemistry and how their dog's brain works and those sorts of things, but that was accessible to the everyday person as well. And I wanted it initially to be at a price point that didn't prevent people from getting the good information. Because I just looked at it as kind of an evergreen business move, right? I looked at it as something where I could put the time and I think I put 300 or 400 hours into building out the courses and editing the videos and doing all that stuff. And so it was something I wanted to put into the time, put the information down, and then be able to have it accessible for a long period of time for people. And so that was kind of the initial push. And then I think really my next evolution, where my heart really is in business and in the dog industry, is helping other trainers. That's really where my heart is. And so I want to continue to do the consumer side because I just want to make sure that there's great information out there for people and good help. And then my next evolution is helping other trainers, because a lot of people don't know this, but along with things like veterinary medicine, dog trainers have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession. And it coincides very frequently with other compassion fatigue professions, right? And for those of you that don't know, compassion fatigue is just simply job roles where your emotional capacity is tied into your client base or your job, and that emotional capacity starts to drain from you over time. And you become fatigued by it. Like psychologically, it creates all sorts of mental health issues and things like that. And so that runs rampant in the dog training industry. The average dog trainer is only in the industry for 4 years. Wow. And so it's a very, very quick turnover, quick burnout industry because of that compassion element of it. Because when you're taking care of people's children, it takes one wrong move for things to go really bad really fast. If you don't take care of a dog properly and a dog loses too much weight, you will be on the 5 o'clock news and your business may never recover. And so those sorts of things, it's a very heavy cancel culture industry where people are very quick to try to sacrifice somebody. And so there's a lot of dog trainers out there that burn out. And one of the primary reasons that they burn out is because they can't ever figure out how to balance making a living and producing an income with the passion for the job that they have.
Welcome to small business ownership.
100%. And so that's kind of my thing. Is we've been very fortunate. We've been able to build a very successful brick and mortar company here in Tennessee. We're probably in the top 1% of dog training companies by earnings in the country. And so we've done so with all the things stacked against us that everybody would tell you can't be done. We are not in our market. My location is more than an hour removed from my market. And my clients happily drive to me. And so people tell me all the time, well, I don't live in a big city. Neither do I. The closest major airport for me is an hour and 15 minutes away. And that's Nashville. I'm just over an hour east of Nashville. I'm 70 miles from downtown. And so there's traffic. There's traffic to come to me. There's traffic to get back. I'm living out in the middle of the country. And so to get out here is a pain in the butt for my clients. But I have proven that it can be done regardless of location. It all is based off of how they build their business model and how they build their business as a way that can provide them the lifestyle that they want. And so it's missing hugely in the dog training industry. The average dog trainer across our country earns $45,000 a year. And that's business owners making $45,000 a year. And that's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure and a lot of time and a lot of animal care and a lot of love into your clients to give for what you could make working as a stalker at Walmart overnight. Mm-hmm. And so it's exhausting and it's because they don't know. And so that's really my next evolution is I want to move into helping other dog trainers understand how to grow and develop their businesses. Not just, there's a bazillion marketing companies out there for dog trainers, that will have leads ready to buy dog training on your doorstep. There's a bazillion of those. There's not anybody that really takes another business owner by the hand and goes, your pricing structure is all messed up. Your communication strategy with your clients is all messed up. You don't have any CRMs and automations built to help you with your workflow, right? You don't have you're not using any technology to help you with your workflow and really helping them dial in a business that they can be proud of and that they can get some rest from and not only get the income they deserve for the skill set they have, but also get the lifestyle that they want to have out of it. And so that's really kind of our next evolution. We're getting ready to launch some things first part of the year for people in the dog training industry. My goal is not to belittle the way that they train or tell them they don't know what they're doing. That will always be an open book for them. And so I that's one of the reasons I want to do it more on a consulting type of basis, because I want to be a resource for them. I want them to go, man, I've had this dog for 3 weeks and I can't get this dog to take food from my hand. What have you done in this situation? Whether they're force-free or whether they're balance trainers, we all still run into a lot of the same problems that can be solved through solid strategy. And what I don't want to do is try to change what they are convicted about, who they believe they should be as a dog trainer, as long as they're not being abusive. Then we won't be doing business together. Mm-hmm. But if they feel like they're doing what's best, I want to figure out how to help them in the best way that I can. And so whether we agree perfectly on methodology or not is not my concern. Mm-hmm. There's an old saying in the dog training world that the only thing that two trainers can agree on is what the third one's doing wrong. And so that's been around the dog training world for a while. And it's so true. Dog trainers are so catty. They fight about methodology all the time. And I just stay out of that stuff because I'm not interested in it. My job, I don't feel like my calling is to change a dog trainer's mind. It's kind of like arguing politics on Facebook. Whose mind are you changing? Nobody, right? And so it just doesn't make any sense. And so I don't feel like that's my job, is to change another dog trainer's mind. My job is to educate the general public, help people understand so that people can make educated decisions. Because that's how you can actually change an industry, is if people are educated enough that they know the bad from the good, problem solved. And so, but yeah, that's really where my heart is. I know so many unbelievably gifted dog trainers around the country that just still to this day believe that being a good dog trainer is enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not. It's just not. Business is so much of a different skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And really over the years, and I'm sure you can identify with this a bit, but over the years, my passion has shifted from dogs to business. I still love dogs,
Mm-hmm.
but as I've really learned to enjoy the game of business,
Mm-hmm.
it has become a passion for me, and I really enjoy it. And I want to help other people fall in love with their business. And I think the reason that most don't is because they just don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way to love more dogs is to create a better business, right? Because
100%.
if you don't create a business that gives you time, freedom, money, then you do burn out. Then you can't help any dogs or any people anymore because you're just done, right?
That's
So
right.
the long game is like, what can you create?